His hand wrapped around my throat, not squeezing, just holding, and I could feel his pulse under my palm. Vampires aren't supposed to have a pulse. But there it was, thundering against my fingertips like a confession. "You feel it too," he whispered, and I realized the most dangerous thing in this room wasn't his fangs. It was how badly I wanted to say yes. The champagne had been Imani's idea. The fourth glass, definitely my mistake. But stumbling through the crimson-draped corridors of the Monarch Hotel during Springfield's Halloween masquerade and calling the man in the antique chair my baby daddy because he looked like he collected ex-wives instead of watches? That was the mistake that split my life into before and after. I didn't know he was the vampire king. Didn't know vampires existed outside of HBO subscriptions and my niece's Twilight obsession. Didn't know my blood carried something ancient, something his kind had hunted across centuries of darkness. All I knew was that his eyes, deep crimson in the amber light, which I'd stupidly assumed were colored contacts, locked onto mine with an intensity that made my exhausted body suddenly remember it was still capable of feeling something other than bone-deep fatigue. When he smiled, slow and deliberate like he was tasting my scent on the air, every instinct I'd honed through 38 years of disappointment screamed at me to run. But I've never been good at doing what I should. If you've ever felt drawn to something you knew could destroy you, if you've ever wondered what it means to want the very thing you should fear, you're not alone in that hunger. These stories, they're for women like us, who understand that surrender isn't always weakness. The sunlight stabbing through my bedroom blinds felt personal, vindictive even. I groaned, pressing my face deeper into the pillow that smelled like cheap wine and regret, and tried to remember why my throat felt like someone had wrapped barbed wire around it while I slept. The Halloween party. The champagne. Imani dragging me past velvet ropes I had no business crossing. And then, my eyes snapped open. The man in the chair. The private room. His hand on my face, cool and possessive, tilting my chin up while everyone watched. The way he'd leaned in close enough that I'd felt his breath against my pulse point, and the world had narrowed to just that single point of almost contact. And then nothing. The memory dissolved into champagne-soaked static. I sat up too fast. The room tilted. My hand flew to my throat, expecting the phantom pain to fade, but my fingers found something else instead. 2 small marks. Raised. Still tender. "What the hell?" I whispered, stumbling out of bed toward the bathroom mirror. Under the harsh fluorescent light, they were unmistakable. 2 puncture wounds, neat and deliberate, right over my carotid artery. The skin around them was slightly bruised, as if someone had. No. That was insane. It was Halloween. Someone had probably gotten too enthusiastic with costume makeup, or I'd scratched myself in my sleep, or... The business card sat on my nightstand like an accusation. Heavy cardstock. Cream-colored. Embossed with letters that caught the light. JS. And below, in handwriting that looked like it belonged in a museum, a single sentence that made my stomach drop. "You belong to me now. We'll discuss terms." JS. My hands shook as I flipped it over. On the back, an address in Springfield's historic district. The kind of neighborhood where houses had names instead of numbers and old money meant their fortunes predated the Civil War. This had to be a joke. Some elaborate prank Imani had orchestrated because I'd been working 70-hour weeks and she thought I needed to live a little. Except Imani's idea of elaborate was buying 2-for-1 margaritas at Chili's. I grabbed my phone. 17 missed calls from Imani. 3 voicemails. And a text from an unknown number, timestamped at 3:47 a.m. "Sleep well, Clarissa. I'll see you soon." How did they know my name? I'd been too drunk to introduce myself, hadn't I? My reflection stared back at me, pale and hollow-eyed, with those 2 marks screaming against my skin like a brand. Like ownership. "You belong to me now." I spent the morning trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Took a shower hot enough to scald, scrubbed at the marks until my skin was raw, researched realistic vampire bite makeup on Reddit forums where people debated corn syrup blood recipes and latex prosthetics. By noon, I'd almost succeeded in explaining it away. Then I went to work. Springfield Medical Transcription Services occupied the third floor of a building that had been under renovation since I started working there 4 years ago. The elevator rattled. The carpet was the color of medical waste. And my cubicle, tucked between the break room and the bathroom, smelled perpetually like burnt coffee and someone's microwaved fish lunch from 2019. I loved it. Not because it was glamorous, God, it wasn't, but because it was mine. Because I'd clawed my way back from bankruptcy and a divorce that had left me sleeping on my sister's couch, and this cubicle represented the fact that I'd survived. "You look like death," Imani announced, appearing over my cubicle wall with a protein shake and judgment. "What happened after I lost you last night?" "Nothing," I lied, tugging my scarf higher to hide the marks. "Too much champagne. You know how I get." "I know you disappeared for an hour and then texted me that you'd gotten an Uber home." Her eyes narrowed. "Except I saw you leave. With him." The air in my lungs went thin. "With who?" "The guy from the VIP section. Tall, dark, looked like he'd stepped out of a Victorian funeral, but make it sexy." She leaned closer, voice dropping. "Clarissa, I've lived in Springfield my whole life. I know the old families. The ones who don't come out during the day, who own half the city through shell companies, who show up at charity galas and everyone pretends not to notice they haven't aged since the photos from 1987. Her hand gripped my arm. "That was Jacob Stone's. And you don't just walk away from Jacob Stone's." The name hit me like cold water. "That's not possible," I said, but the words felt hollow. "Vampires aren't real." Imani's laugh was bitter. "Honey, there's a reason Springfield has the lowest crime rate in Illinois despite being broke as hell. There's a reason the North Side District thrives while every other downtown rots. There are rules here. Old rules. And you just stumbled drunk into the throne room and," she paused, eyes widening as she spotted my neck. "Oh my God. He marked you." I jerked away, but it was too late. She'd seen. "It's nothing. Makeup. A prank. Clarissa." Her voice cracked. "Do you understand what this means? A mark like that, that's a claiming. You're under his protection now. Or his ownership. And you don't get to choose which." Before I could respond, the office went quiet. It wasn't a natural quiet. It was the kind that happens when predators enter a space full of prey, when everyone's instincts start screaming danger even before their conscious minds catch up. I turned slowly in my chair. He stood in the doorway to our floor. Impossible and undeniable. Jacob Stones looked nothing like a man who belonged in a building with water-stained ceiling tiles and a broken vending machine. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my car, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a black shirt underneath that made his pale skin look like marble. His dark hair was pushed back from a face that was all sharp angles and barely contained hunger. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart. Dark red, unmistakable in the fluorescent light. Not contacts. Never contacts. "Hello, Clarissa," he said, and his voice rolled through the room like smoke. "Cultured. European. Ancient. We need to talk." The car he sent was a Mercedes. Black. Silent. The kind of vehicle that whispered money so old it had stopped bothering to announce itself. I sat in the back seat, still wearing my work clothes, a cardigan with a coffee stain on the sleeve and pants I'd bought at Target 3 years ago, and watched Springfield transform through the tinted windows. We left behind the world I knew. The strip malls and chain restaurants. The neighborhoods where people hung Christmas lights in October because they couldn't afford to replace them every year. The car climbed into the bluffs, where the houses grew farther apart and the trees older, where wrought iron gates guarded driveways that disappeared into forest. His estate sat at the end of a private road. Victorian Gothic. All dark stone and towering windows, with gardens that looked like they'd been designed by someone who understood that beauty could be a weapon. The kind of place that had a name, probably. The kind of place where women like me only entered through the service entrance. But the driver opened my door, led me up the front steps. And I walked through that massive door like I had any right to be there, because what else was I supposed to do? Run? He'd already found me at work. Already paid off debt I hadn't asked him to touch. Already marked me. Jacob waited in a dining room that could have swallowed my entire apartment. The table was set for two, crystal and silver that caught the candlelight. And him, at the head of it all, still wearing that perfect suit, watching me with those impossible eyes.
"Sit," he said.
Not a request. I sat. Not because he commanded it, but because my legs had stopped holding me up somewhere between the foyer and this moment.
He poured wine.
Red, of course. The universe's idea of a joke. "You have questions," he said. "Ask them." "What are you?" The words came out steadier than I felt. "Old." He took a sip, and I watched his throat move. Watched him swallow. Things vampires weren't supposed to do. Very old. And very tired of pretending to be anything else. The marks on my neck are real, as am I. He set down the glass. As is what you are, Clarissa. What you've always been, though you didn't know it. The room felt too warm, too small. And what's that? A morning star. He said it like it should mean something. Like it should change everything. A human born with a genetic marker that makes you compatible with my kind. Capable of bonding with us. Of becoming us if you choose. There are perhaps a dozen of you left in the world. And I've been alive for 847 years without ever encountering one. His gaze held mine. Until you stumbled drunk into my court and called me your baby daddy. I should have laughed. Should have walked out. Should have done anything except sit there feeling something crack open inside my chest. You're insane. I'm honest. There's a difference. He stood, moving around the table with that fluid grace that didn't look quite human. The bond between us has already begun. You feel it, don't you? The pull. The way you knew I was close before you saw me. The way your body reacts when I'm near. My hands were shaking. I hid them in my lap. That's not real. That's just. Your pulse is racing. He was behind me now. I hadn't heard him move. And mine matches it. Beat for beat. Do you know how long it's been since my heart remembered how to do that? Stop. But I didn't move when his hand settled on my shoulder. Didn't pull away when his thumb traced the marks on my neck. It will intensify, he continued, his voice low and clinical, like he was explaining a diagnosis. Every day, you'll crave my presence more. Sense when I'm near. Dream of me. Need me. By your 40th birthday, if you haven't accepted the bond. He paused. Madness. Psychological deterioration. The human mind wasn't designed to resist a pull this primal. I jerked away, standing so fast the chair scraped. You're telling me I'm supernaturally roofied? That I don't get a choice? I'm telling you what you are. His expression didn't change. Cold. Matter of fact. What you've always been. The bond doesn't create feelings, Clarissa. It removes your ability to lie about them. To yourself. To me. That's bullshit. My voice cracked. I don't even know you. Don't you? He tilted his head. You looked at me that night and saw something no one else does. You weren't afraid. You were curious. Amused. Like I was just a man worth teasing instead of a monster worth fearing. Something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like pain. Do you know what that does to someone who's spent centuries being treated like either a god or a plague? I wanted to hate him. Wanted to hold on to my anger like a shield. But I saw it then, the loneliness radiating off him like cold. The way he stood in this enormous house full of beautiful things and looked utterly alone. I crushed the sympathy before it could take root. How many? I asked. How many women have you done this to? None. The word hung between us. In 847 years, I've never had a mate. Never wanted one. Never believed I was capable of wanting anything beyond survival and power. He moved closer, and I held my ground. And then you stumbled into my world and laughed at me. And I felt something I thought had died centuries ago. His hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about him. I can feel your pulse from across the room, he whispered. It calls to me, like a song I've been listening for my entire existence without knowing I was deaf. And God help me, I felt it. His pulse. Impossible. Undeniable. Thundering under my palm where my hand had somehow found his chest. matching mine, proving everything he'd said. This isn't fair, I whispered.
No.
His thumb traced my lower lip. It's not, but fairness is a luxury neither of us can afford. He stepped back, and the absence of his touch felt like cold water. I'll give you time. But time is all I'll give you, Clarissa. Because there are others who know what you are now. And they won't be as patient. He walked toward the door, then paused. The car will take you home. Your debt has been cleared. Your mother's hospice care upgraded. Consider it an investment in your future. In our future. I didn't ask you to. I know. He looked back, and his smile was terrible. Beautiful and broken and ancient. But you'll accept it anyway. Because you're 38 years old, and you've spent your entire life too tired to want anything for yourself. And I'm offering you everything you've been too afraid to take. Then he was gone, and I stood alone in that dining room, touching the marks on my neck, feeling a pulse that shouldn't exist, and wondering if I'd just been claimed or saved. Or if, maybe, they were the same thing. I tried. God, I tried to go back to normal. I showed up at work, transcribed medical reports about herniated discs and type 2 diabetes. Made coffee in the break room with the machine that only worked if you kicked it twice. Smiled at Imani when she asked if I was okay. Lied and said yes. But my body was rewriting itself without asking permission. The cut on my hand from a broken mug healed overnight. Not slowly. Not with a scab. It just closed. Like my skin had remembered a blueprint it had forgotten. I stopped needing sleep the same way. Could function on 3 hours when I used to need 8 just to feel half alive. Food tasted wrong. Everything tasted wrong. Actually, except for rare steak and this craving for salt that no amount of pretzels could satisfy. And him. I felt him constantly. It wasn't like thinking about someone. It was deeper than that. More invasive. I'd be standing in line at the grocery store and suddenly know he was close. A pressure change in my chest. A magnetic pull that made me turn toward the entrance before I saw him walking through it. He never approached. Just watched from across the produce section while I stood there with wilted lettuce in my hand, feeling my pulse accelerate like a betrayal. You're obsessed, Imani said one afternoon, cornering me in the break room. And don't tell me you're not. You check your phone every 5 minutes. You jump every time the door opens. You're losing weight. Her voice dropped. Clarissa, whatever he did to you, we can fix this. There are people. Protections. I'm fine. I wasn't fine. I was unraveling. But admitting that felt like surrendering, and I'd spent too many years clawing my way back from rock bottom to surrender now. Except surrender didn't require my consent. It was happening anyway. He appeared everywhere. The coffee shop where I bought my morning Americano. The library where I'd gone to research Morningstar mythology and found only folklore. Outside my apartment building at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. Leaning against a car that cost more than my yearly salary, watching my window like he could see through walls. I'm not stalking you, he said the 4th time I confronted him, this time in the parking lot of a Target I'd driven 30 minutes out of my way to avoid him. You're calling to me whether you mean to or not. I'm not calling anyone. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Some part of me was screaming for him. Had been since the moment he'd marked me. Maybe even before. Your pulse quickens when you think of me, he said, moving closer. Not touching. Never touching without invitation, which somehow made it worse. You dream of me. I know because I dream of you, and in those dreams, you're not afraid. You're. Stop. I wrapped my arms around myself. Just stop. I can't do this. I can't be whatever you need me to be. Something softened in his face. I'm not asking you to be anything except honest. With yourself, if not with me. Then he was gone. Again. And I stood in a Target parking lot at sunset, shaking, hating how empty the space felt where he'd been standing. It happened on a Tuesday. I was leaving work late, taking the back stairwell because the elevator was broken again when the temperature dropped 10 degrees between one floor and the next. The lights flickered. And I knew, that same primal instinct that recognized Jacob, that something was wrong. He stood at the bottom of the stairs.
Tall.
Beautiful. Wrong in a way that made my skin crawl despite the smile he offered. His accent was French, or maybe older than French. "Clarissa Adams," he said, tasting my name. "You smell like unclaimed territory, Sherry. Like an invitation no one's accepted yet." I backed up a step. "I don't know who you—" "Laurent Beaumont." He climbed toward me, each step deliberate. "And you are causing quite the stir among the old families. Jacob claims you're his, but I see no mate mark. No bond seal. Just his scent all over you like cologne." He inhaled deeply, marking without claiming. How very American of him. My back hit the wall. "He'll know you're here." "Will he?" Lauren's hand came up, not touching, just hovering near my throat, near the marks that hadn't faded. "Or will you call for him? I wonder which happens first, his arrival or your silence." The door above us exploded open. I didn't see Jacob move. One moment Laurent was smiling at me. The next he was against the opposite wall, Jacob's hand wrapped around his throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. The sound Laurent made wasn't human. Wasn't even animal. It was the sound of something ancient recognizing something older. "Touch her again," Jacob said, his voice so cold it burned, "and I'll scatter your ashes across every territory you've ever claimed. Do you understand me?" Laurent nodded frantically. Jacob released him, and he fled. Actually fled, disappearing up the stairs so fast he left scorch marks on the concrete. I stood frozen against the wall, my heart trying to escape through my throat. Jacob turned to me, and his eyes were pure crimson now. Inhuman. Terrifying. And underneath my horror, I felt something else. Something hot and shameful that curled in my stomach and made me press my thighs together. "You almost killed him," I whispered. "For you, I would have. Gladly." He crossed to me in 2 strides. "Do you understand now? What you are. What you represent. There are others like Laurent.
Dozens of them.
And I'm the only thing standing between you and a territorial war that will paint this city red. I didn't ask for this." My voice broke. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know." His hand cupped my face, and I should have pulled away. Should have run. But I leaned into his touch like I'd been starving for it. "But you have it anyway. You have me. Whether you want me or not." Then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. Wasn't asking permission. It was claiming and desperate, and tasted like centuries of loneliness finally breaking. I kissed him back. God help me. I kissed him back with everything I'd been denying for days. My hands fisted in his perfect suit. My back arched against the wall. And for those few heartbeats, I stopped being the woman who'd survived a divorce and bankruptcy and 38 years of disappointment, and became something wild and wanting and wholly his. I shoved him away, gasping.
"No. This isn't me."
"This is the bond. Making me feel things I don't." "Is it?" His thumb traced my swollen lips. "Or is the bond just making you honest about what you've wanted since the moment you saw me?" I couldn't answer. Couldn't speak past the truth lodged in my throat. He stepped back, straightening his suit like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just unmade me with a single kiss. "The car will take you home. Lock your doors tonight. And Clarissa?" His eyes met mine. "Stop fighting what you already know is inevitable. All you're doing is making yourself miserable." Then he left me there, alone in a stairwell that still smelled like his cologne and my surrender. And I touched my lips where I could still feel him, and wondered if I'd just lost or if I'd been lost all along. The dress arrived 3 days later. Emerald silk that moved like water, with a neckline that would showcase the marks I'd stopped trying to hide. No note. Just a card with an address and a time. 8 p.m. I should have refused. Should have burned it. Should have done anything except stand in front of my bathroom mirror an hour later, watching a stranger stare back at me. The dress fit perfectly.
Of course it did.
He'd probably know my measurements before I did. Before I'd lost 15 pounds to this supernatural starvation diet my body had designed without consulting me. The car arrived at 7:30. I got in because the alternative was wondering forever what would happen if I didn't. The gathering was in Springfield's oldest district, in a mansion that looked like it had been standing since before the city remembered its own name. Gas lamps flickered along the drive. The windows glowed with candlelight that somehow felt older than electricity, more honest than anything powered by a switch. Jacob met me at the entrance. He wore black, suit, shirt, everything, and looked like walking midnight. "You came," he said, and I heard the surprise underneath. Did I have a choice? Always. His hand found the small of my back. "But I'm grateful you made this one." Then he led me inside, into a world I didn't have words for. Beautiful people, beautiful monsters, filled rooms that dripped with wealth so old it had fossilized into elegance. They moved like dancers, like predators, like something that had learned to mimic human grace and perfected it past the point of recognition. Their eyes tracked me as we passed. Hungry, curious, calculating. "A morning star," someone whispered. The words rippled through the crowd like wind through dead leaves. I thought they were extinct. Jacob's hand tightened on my back. Possessive. Protective. The same thing, maybe. We stopped in what must have been a ballroom once. Now it held a semicircle of chairs occupied by vampires who looked like they'd been sitting there since the house was built. Ancient faces. Ageless eyes. And, at the center, a man who made even Jacob look young. "Lucien," Jacob said, and his voice had gone formal.
Cold.
"May I present Clarissa Adams?" Lucien studied me like I was a specimen.
A thing.
His smile revealed teeth too white, too sharp. "A morning star. How unexpected." He stood, moving with a liquid grace that made my survival instinct scream.
"She's unmarked, Jacob."
"Unclaimed. Under ancient law, she's contested territory." The room went silent. "She's under my protection." Jacob's voice could have cut glass. "That's claim enough. Protection isn't possession." Lucien circled me, and I forced myself to stay still, to not show the fear crawling up my spine. "She carries your scent, yes. Your mark, barely. But the bond seal?" He stopped in front of me, inhaling deeply. "Absent. Which means she hasn't accepted you. Which means she's fair game." "Touch her," Jacob said quietly, "and you'll learn exactly how fair I can be." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lucien laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and returned to his chair. "Protective. How quaint. Almost human of you, old friend." The evening became a nightmare dressed in silk and candlelight. I stood at Jacob's side while vampires discussed territorial disputes and blood rights like they were debating stocks. Watched them settle arguments with violence, so swift I barely saw it happen, just the before and after, the smile and the submission. This was their world. Elegant brutality. Power games played with centuries of practice. And I was the newest piece on the board. "You should leave." The voice came from behind me. A young vampire, young-looking, anyway, with kind eyes that didn't match the warning in her words. "I'm Celeste. And I'm telling you as someone who remembers being human. Run while you can." "Why?" I asked. "Because we don't feel like you do. We can't." She glanced toward Jacob, who was speaking with another elder vampire, his posture rigid with controlled rage. "Whatever you think you see in him, whatever softness you imagine, it's not real. We're predators wearing human faces. And the kindest thing he could do is let you go." But I'd been watching Jacob all night, seen the way he positioned himself between me and every potential threat. The way his jaw tightened when Lucien spoke. The careful control in every movement, like he was holding himself back from something violent and necessary. He did feel. I saw it in every rigid line of his body. He just didn't know how to let himself. The gathering ended near midnight. Jacob escorted me out in silence, his hand still on my back, his body still angled like a shield. We stood on the steps while the car pulled around, and I felt him shaking. "Barely. But there." "They're right," he said finally. "You should run. Get in that car and tell the driver to take you anywhere but here. I'll arrange protection. New identity. Whatever you need to disappear." "Then why won't you let me go?" The question came out softer than I meant it. He turned to face me, and his eyes were full of something that looked like anguish. Like centuries of denying himself anything real had finally caught up with him. "Because I'm a monster," he whispered. "And monsters keep what they want, even when keeping it means destroying it." His hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he'd just said. "You walked into my world and saw a man. Not a king. Not a predator. Just a man worth teasing. And I've spent 800 years convinced I was incapable of being anything except what fear and necessity made me." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "But with you, I remember what it felt like to want something beyond survival. To hope for something I have no right to ask for. What if I'm not running?" The words escaped before I could stop them. Before I could think about what they meant, what they cost. Something broke in his expression. Relief and terror and desperate hope all at once. "Then God help us both," he said. "Because I won't be able to let you go.
Not now.
Not ever." He kissed me then, softer than before, slower, like he was memorizing me. Like I was something precious instead of claimed. And I kissed him back with the full weight of my truth. I didn't want to run anymore. Didn't want to fight this thing between us that felt like gravity and destiny, and the first real thing I'd wanted in years. When he pulled away, we were both shaking. Both terrified. Both in too deep to pretend we had a choice. "Take me home," I whispered. "Not to my apartment." I didn't have to say it. He understood. Chicago in November looked like a city trying to remember what warmth felt like. We drove through streets slick with early snow, past buildings that scraped the sky like they were trying to escape the ground. The summit was held in a hotel older than most of the country, the kind of place where presidents had slept and mob bosses had made deals, and now, apparently, vampires gathered to discuss things like territorial rights and the fate of women stupid enough to fall for their kings. I wore black this time. Jacob had sent it without asking. A dress that made me look like I belonged in their world of old money and older power. I hated how well it fit. Hated more that I'd put it on without hesitation. "You don't have to do this," Jacob said for the 7th time as we rode the elevator to the penthouse suite. "I can turn the car around. Get you somewhere safe before." Before what? I looked at him. Really looked. He'd barely spoken since we left Springfield. Barely touched me. The careful control he always wore had fractured into something raw and desperate. "Before they kill me? Before you have to choose between me and your throne." I stepped closer. "I'm already here, Jacob. We're past the point of turning around." The doors opened onto a room full of monsters pretending to be civilized. They sat in a circle, 12 of them, representing every major territory in America. Ancient faces. Patient eyes. The kind of immortals who'd watched empires rise and fall and learned that waiting was just another weapon. And at the center, like a snake coiled in tall grass, Laurent smiled at me. "Ah," he said. "The morning star. Still breathing. How temporary." Jacob's hand found mine. Squeezed once. A warning or a promise, I couldn't tell which. Lucien stood at the head of the circle. "We convene under ancient law. Laurent Beaumont has formally challenged Jacob Stone's claim on the human Clarissa Adams, who carries the morning star marker. Let the challenge be heard." Laurent rose. All continental charm and calculated malice. "Jacob has marked but not claimed. Protected but not bonded. By our oldest laws, an unclaimed morning star is too dangerous to be left in contested territory. She represents power. Bloodline. The ability to create hybrids that could shift the balance we've maintained for centuries." He turned those cold eyes on me. "She must accept a mate bond or be eliminated. There is no third option." The words hit like ice water. I'd known, theoretically, that I was in danger. But hearing my death discussed like a scheduling conflict made it real in a way nothing else had. "She has until her 40th birthday, Jacob said, his voice barely controlled. "That was the agreement. 2 years to decide." "The agreement was made when we believed you had time," another elder interrupted. A woman with silver hair and a southern accent thick as honey. "But Laurent's challenge changes everything. An unclaimed morning star with multiple suitors is a catalyst for war. She chooses now, or we choose for her. The room went silent, waiting. I felt their attention like physical weight, pressing down, demanding an answer I didn't know how to give. Jacob's hand tightened on mine. Then, he did something I never expected. He let go. There's a third option, he said quietly. I renounce my claim. Fake her death. Hide her somewhere even you can't reach. He looked at the council, and his voice turned to steel. I'll abdicate.
Give up my territory.
Whatever it takes to let her choose freely, without a death sentence hanging over her head. The room erupted. Voices overlapping. Outrage and shock, and something that might have been respect from the elders who remembered what sacrifice looked like. But I wasn't listening to them. I was looking at Jacob, seeing what it cost him to offer this. Everything. His throne. His power. The identity he'd built over 8 centuries. All of it, laid at my feet like an offering. What do you want, Jacob? My voice cut through the chaos. In 847 years, what do you want? He looked at me, and the careful mask shattered completely. I want you, he said, raw and honest and broken. Every night for eternity. I want to wake up and know you chose to stay. I want to hear your heartbeat beside mine and know it's real, not compelled by some ancient bond or death threat. His voice cracked. But not like this. Never like this. You deserve to choose freely, and if that means I lose you, then at least you'll be alive somewhere, living the life you should have had. Something inside me broke and reformed in the same moment. This man, this monster, was willing to give up everything for my choice. Not my compliance. Not my surrender. My actual, genuine choice. I'd spent 38 years making choices based on survival. Based on what I should do, what was practical, what kept me afloat. I'd married a man because it seemed safe, and he'd left because I was too much work. I'd worked jobs I hated because they paid the bills. I'd swallowed my own wants so many times I'd forgotten I was allowed to have them. But standing there, in a room full of predators who'd reduced me to a political problem, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt certain. Then stop asking my permission to want me, I said, and my voice didn't shake. Stop treating my choice like it's something you have to earn or apologize for. I'm here, Jacob. I'm standing in front of a council that just threatened to kill me, wearing a dress you picked out, feeling your pulse in my chest like it's my own. I stepped closer until we were breathing the same air. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Not because I have to. Not because the bond makes me. But because for the first time in my life, I want something impossible and terrifying and wholly mine. His hands came up, framing my face, and his eyes were bright with something that looked like tears he'd forgotten how to cry. Clarissa. I have terms, I interrupted. You turn me yourself. Not as a claiming. Not as ownership. As an act of trust. As proof that you see me as an equal, not a possession. I let him see everything. The fear, the want, the absolute certainty. And we do this together. Partners. Not master and creation. Yes. The word came out broken. Reverent.
Yes.
Anything. Everything. I turned to face the council, Jacob's hands still holding me like I was the only thing keeping him upright. I accept the mate bond, I said clearly. On my terms. With him. Is that decided enough for you? Lucien studied us for a long moment. Then he smiled, genuinely this time. It seems, he said slowly, that the morning star has chosen her king. And the king has learned to kneel. Ancient law is satisfied. He looked at Jacob. Take her home. Complete the bond. And try not to let love make you weak, old friend. Too late, Jacob whispered against my hair. Far too late for that. We didn't speak on the drive back to Springfield. Jacob held my hand like I was something fragile, something he was afraid would disappear if he let go. I watched the city lights blur past and tried not to think about what I'd just agreed to, what I was about to become. His estate was quiet when we arrived, empty of everyone except us. He'd planned this, I realized. Sent away the staff, the security, everyone who might witness what came next. This moment was ours alone. "Are you afraid?" he asked as we stood in his bedroom. Our bedroom now, I supposed. A room I'd never seen but somehow felt like it had been waiting for me. Terrified, I admitted. But not of you. Of losing myself. Of waking up and not recognizing the woman in the mirror. He cupped my face, and his hands were shaking. 800 years old, and his hands were shaking. "You won't lose yourself. I promise you that. You'll just become more of what you already are.
Sharper.
Stronger.
But still you.
Still the woman who looked at a vampire king and called him her baby daddy." I laughed, and it came out choked. Worst pickup line in history. Best thing anyone's ever said to me. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my throat where the marks still lived. "This will hurt," he whispered against my skin. "Dying always does. But then you'll never hurt again. Never be tired. Never be invisible. Never be anything except exactly who you choose to be."
"Do it," I said.
"Before I lose my nerve." His fangs pierced my throat, and the world exploded into sensation.
Pain.
God, the pain. Like every nerve ending caught fire simultaneously. Like my blood was burning, my bones were breaking, my heart was stopping and restarting and learning a new rhythm. I tried to scream, but no sound came. Just this endless, drowning agony that pulled me under. And then, underneath the pain, something else. Pleasure so intense it felt violent. His mouth on my throat. His arms holding me. The feeling of everything I'd been dissolving and reforming into something new. Something permanent. Something chosen. I died in his arms. I'm sure of it. Felt my heart stutter and stop. Felt my last human breath leave my lungs. Felt the moment where Clarissa Adams, medical transcriptionist, divorced, drowning in debt and exhaustion, ceased to exist. And then I was reborn. I woke 3 days later starving. Not hungry, starving. A need so primal it eclipsed thought. Jacob was there, pressing something into my hands. A blood bag. Medical.
Clean.
"Drink," he said, and I did, and the taste was copper and life and everything I'd never known I needed. "Easy," he murmured, pulling it away before I finished. "You have to learn control. Learn to be gentle with this hunger, or it will control you." He taught me everything. How to feed without killing. How to move through this new body that was faster, stronger, sharper than anything human. How to hear heartbeats from blocks away, this overwhelming symphony of life that had always been there, but I'd been deaf to. How to see in the dark. How to feel him, not just near me, but inside me. His heartbeat matching mine. His emotions bleeding into my awareness like we were two instruments finally learning to harmonize. The first time I saw myself in the mirror, I cried. Not because I looked different. I did, sharper somehow, colder more, but because I looked like I'd finally woken up after decades of sleepwalking through my own life. "You're beautiful," Jacob said from behind me, and when I looked at his reflection, I saw him truly for the first time. Not through human eyes that could be lied to, but through this new sight that saw past masks and pretense. He was ancient, damaged, lonely beyond measure, and completely, devastatingly mine. "The bond," I whispered. "It's different now. Because you chose it." His arms wrapped around me. "It's not pulling you, not compelling. It's just there, like breathing, like knowing which way is home." That night, we walked through Springfield together and I saw the city I'd lived in for 15 years like it was brand new. Vampires everywhere, hiding in plain sight, running businesses, sitting in coffee shops, living parallel lives to the humans who never noticed them. This hidden world that had always existed just past the edges of my perception. My phone rang at midnight. My mother's number. I stared at it, and Jacob squeezed my hand. "You don't have to," he said. But I did. Because this was the cost. The price of choosing immortality. "Mom," I said, and my voice was steady even as my heart shattered. "I need you to listen. There's been an accident. I'm not going to be able to visit anymore." The lie tasted like ash. I listened to her cry, listened to her ask questions I couldn't answer, and felt Jacob's arms around me as I grieved the woman I'd been, the life I'd had, the mother I'd never see again except from a distance, watching her grow old while I stayed frozen at 38. "I love you," I said finally. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I hung up before she could respond, before I could take it back. "I didn't know," Jacob whispered into my hair, and his voice was broken. "In 800 years, I never let myself feel anything real enough to hurt. But you made me human again. Made me remember what it costs to love something you can lose." We stood on his balcony as dawn approached, the last dawn that would ever threaten me. Springfield spread below us, sleeping and hunting in equal measure. "So what now?" I asked. "Now we live," he said simply. "Dangerously. Together. For as long as eternity lasts." I leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat synchronized with mine, and thought about that night at the masquerade. How I'd stumbled drunk into his world and called him my baby daddy like it was a joke. How he'd looked at me like I'd broken something inside him that had been sealed shut for centuries. There are others like me now, I realized. Women who've walked into the dark and found they'd been looking for it all along. We don't talk about it with the ones who stayed behind. They wouldn't understand how the cage became a throne. But if you felt something shift inside you while hearing this, if you recognized yourself in the hunger, then you're already part of this world. These stories exist in the spaces between what we're told to want and what we actually crave. And they're easy to lose if you're not careful.
Stay.
There are more of us than you think. "I called you my baby daddy as a joke," I said finally. "Now I'm bound to you for eternity. And the strangest thing?" "What's that?" His lips found my temple. "I'd make the same choice sober." His laugh was soft and real and sounded like hope. "Good," he whispered, "because I'm never letting you go." And standing there as the sun prepared to rise on our first day together, I realized I didn't want him to.